All right, we're going to go through fundamentals of Google Analytics, in particular, channel groupings, source medium, how those get applied, and then also get into some attribution information as well, and how Google deals with attribution, how it attributes sessions and revenue to different channels. This is primarily for DTC. It really can be used for any different company and industry, but there's a little bit of an e-com flair in here because of how we track revenue and such. But just to get started here, really want to focus in on what UTMs are and how those are used. So UTMs are really foundational to how Google Analytics tracks and pulls in traffic and attributes that traffic to different sources of traffic. So for instance, if something comes from paid search or from email or from paid social or social, if you're appending UTM trackers or tags on the URLs, this helps Google understand where that traffic came from and then allows Google to then bucket it into the right channel. You don't always need UTMs. I mean, obviously, if you're running organic search, doesn't use UTMs. Anything organically driven isn't necessarily going to use UTMs. You certainly can put them on your organic posts. You can put them on any of your paid channels for sure, and definitely recommend doing that. But anyways, the UTMs are broken down into multiple different types of query parameters, if you will. So basically, UTM source is a query parameter, UTM medium, UTM campaign. Those are all different parts of the UTM variables. However, there's others too, but these are the three that are needed for telling Google exactly where that traffic's coming from. So the first is UTM medium. That really is the highest level that all of everything else groups into. So different mediums would be things like email or CPC, which is cost per click or paid search, organic, affiliate, display. All of those are different types of mediums. And then underneath the mediums, it tells you the source of that traffic. So for instance, your medium could be CPC, which is paid search, and then the source could be Google if you're running paid search on Google, or it could be Bing if you're running paid search on Bing. Sources could also be Facebook. They could be any other site out there, really. Like it's really where is that traffic coming from directly? What's the referrer of that? So that's where the source comes in. And then campaign. Campaign is just a way for you to be able to specifically attribute to a click or a session to your website to a campaign you might be running. So you can put anything in here. You can put in information about if it's a seasonal campaign you're running, if it's driving to a certain portion of your website or your certain audiences. I mean, campaigns can be really a lot of different things. But these are the three core components that are required to be in your query string if you're using UTMs. Google sometimes, actually Google, you don't have to have campaign. It is technically required, but certainly Google will still track properly if it's not in there. But for sure, source and medium, you want to get in there to have a proper attribution of your traffic and revenue and everything else that's coming through. So that's how UTMs are broken down. And then really all of your reports inside Google Analytics are going to use that source and medium to then break down or then to be pushed into different channel groupings. So channel groupings are just a cleaner way to look at the traffic that's coming in. So different channels could be things like direct, organic search, social, email, affiliate. All of those are Google Analytics uses a way to kind of pull and bucket your traffic into these channel groupings using things like source medium. So your source being something like Google and your medium being something like organic. And Google uses those defined UTM parameters, or really just where the traffic's coming from, even if you're not using UTM parameters, to bucket into these different categories. So this is just a screenshot from Google Analytics. I'll jump in there in a second so we can see that specifically. But this is where all of these are system defined. So Google has these kind of concept of a default channel grouping set and they're all system defined by default. And so Google, without you doing anything, will already bucket your traffic into one of these 9 categories. However, you do want to make adjustments to this because there is usually problems. I've never seen a Google Analytics account without some sort of issue where traffic isn't being bucketed into the right channel properly. So it does need adjustment. So how, and I'll show you that in a sec, but how do you get into channel groupings or how channel groupings are used in your actual reporting? You can see here, this is the channel group report. You get to this by going in Google Analytics under acquisition, and then all traffic, and then channels. And I'll show you that in a second. But effectively, this is what the reports start to look like. So you can see every row is broken down by a channel. So email, direct, paid search. And then you can see how many sessions, how much revenue was driven by that particular channel. So this is really where you can really start to slice things down and start to see, all right, how are my channels being, are impacting my sessions and revenue. You can also add channels as a secondary dimension to different reports. So this is like a page report. And you can see I've got my channel groupings added as a secondary dimension. So I can quickly see what categories, or sorry, what pages people are being driven to by what different, what channel. So emails has a big impact on certain channels, direct, other, which is a problem actually. We'll talk about that, why the others coming in, organic search, paid search. So you can see where channels are driving traffic to on your website very easily. So the first thing you want to do when you're looking at your channel reports is to look for issues. And I definitely recommend looking at this, every few weeks, every month at least, because issues can creep up even if you've cleaned them up, particularly in this other category. Or if you add a new channel, you change agencies or change who's running your media, that tends to cause issues with channels because they may change their UTM sources and things like that. So definitely want to look at this and make sure that things are clean. But the most common issues are traffic being tracked as other. So right here we've got a breakdown of all of these channels are coming in as other, and you can see there's something like Facebook as paid social. So really this shouldn't be coming in as other. This should be coming in as a channel of paid social. Or in emails coming in into other. Here's some example. Yes, other paid social displays coming in. So really, when you go into your reports, definitely check out that other category or the channel grouping and your channel and see and make sure there's nothing coming in that is shouldn't be. And really, other shouldn't have a whole lot of stuff in there. It should be almost nothing. So you have other coming in. You also, affiliate can also oftentimes get bucketed into referral. So a lot of times Google sees traffic coming from a site like Retail Me Not. And if it doesn't have proper UTM tracking on it, Google will think that it's just traffic coming from any other site. And so it'll bucket it into referral. So this is pretty common as well, where if referring traffic comes in, that should be affiliate. And then also if you're running on the Google Display Network for display, since it's running through Google Ads, Google actually, for some reason, buckets it into paid search. Like it's a little frustrating because you'd think that it would be able to kind of know, but it doesn't without some adjustment. So that's another thing to look at if you're running GDN, Google Display Network, seeing if that's coming into paid search. And this may come in many different varieties of ways, but something to look out for. So I'm going to take a moment here and jump into Google Analytics so we can take a look and see what that might look like on a given site. So here's an actual channel grouping. So I got there by going to acquisition, all traffic, channels, and you can see the channel groupings get listed out here with all the user information, session information, revenue information. And you can do a couple different things. You can click right into something here just to get more detail. So if I click right here into display, this will now tell me the source of that. And then you can also do you can add what is called secondary dimensions to your reports too. So for instance, if I'm on the channel report, I can come in and add type in source, and then select source medium, and then it starts to break down my what the source medium is for that particular channel. So you can quickly see if things line up appropriately. So this looks right. I've got affiliate coming into affiliates. I've got CPM, which is display, coming into display. That looks right. CPC is coming into paid search. That looks right. So you can start to see how things are broken down. And then these are coming in as not set, so they're going to other. So this actually looks pretty clean. I'm using sorry, this one doesn't look great. So this is coming in as direct none. However, it's coming into paid search. So there might be an issue there that we want to get into looking at. So anyway, your account's going to look different. Probably your other is going to look a lot messier than this. It's pretty common for that to happen. So you definitely want to get that stuff cleaned up when you can. So we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. So before I jump into that, there is like I said, the default channel groups that Google has set up when Google Analytics gets set the first time. And there's many different channels that Google has associated to it. And so you want to adjust this default channel group. However, there's some things you want to pay attention to make sure you're not making any more issues than what's already going on. So a default channel group is one of the kind of downsides to it is when you make edits to a default channel group, it's not retroactive, right? So it will not affect any historical data, and it actually changes the actual data. And you want to make sure that you are making adjustments to it and you're confident in those changes, because once you make those changes, it's set. I've made mistakes before where actually even have changed a channel name. And when you make the name to a channel, even that gets set. So if you even add like an S at the end of a channel or something, if you look at historical data versus data going forward, your reports won't line up because the channel name has changed. So the same thing can happen when you start changing the filters or the rules in your channel group. So just be really cautious when you're changing your default channel group. And I'll show you how to add a custom group to kind of get around that, at least to test your things out. So they're not retroactive. Default channel groups are actually the only thing that will show up in Google's API, Google Analytics API. So if you do pull into like Google Sheets, you pull into Data Studio or any other third-party tool out there that using Google Analytics API, it will only use the default channel group. So in addition to that, all of the reports across Google Analytics interface only uses the default channel groups for the most part. So you want to make sure your default channel grouping setup is set up properly. So this is a rundown of all the rules that Google uses to assign your different sources of traffic into different channels. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you could grab a screenshot off of this and look at it if you want to. But this is how Google associates different types of traffic into different channels. And so again, this is done by default. You don't have to do anything for a lot of these things to happen, but there are things we want to edit and correct to make sure everything's clean. Another big caveat, make sure whenever you're using UTM in your URLs, always use lowercase. Just make that a best practice and a constant, because Google will see uppercase and lowercase differently. And if your rules don't match, you could have traffic bucketing into the wrong channel. So this is a good example of that. Right here, you can see email, the medium is coming over with a capital E. And it actually got bucketed into other because Google didn't know that it was actually email because there was a capital E. Kind of silly, but just make sure that you're using consistency, or you can set up rules in your channel groupings to make sure that they're properly capturing that traffic. So if this was my account here, there's a lot of issues here. I've got a lot of things coming into other. So paid social is coming into other, email is coming into other, displays coming into other. And I definitely recommend, if you're running paid social, set up a separate channel for that. Google just has a social channel, which buckets everything in there, or you can see in this case, it pulls it into other. So you don't get a clean read. In this case, there's almost $15,000 worth of revenue that's getting attributed to other and not attributed to your paid social campaigns when you're looking at the channel reports. So it's really important to get this cleaned up. So the way to do that is to go into your into Google Analytics, and under Admin, there's a section where you can go under, wrong one. Go to Admin and go under Channel Settings, go to Channel Grouping. And you'll probably just see one option here. I've added another one here, but you'll see this default channel grouping. This is the one that you need to change. However, huge caution, like make sure that you're set and you know what you're doing here, and you don't go make changes that are going to impact and may cause issues later or down the road. And I'll show you how to avoid that a bit. But as I click into this, you can see I've got a couple different user-defined channels. So in this case, I have paid social as one of them. So again, this is not, by default, Google's only going to have social, the system-defined one. It's not going to have a paid social one. So I added this, and what I did is there's tons of things you can select as to set up your rules. Pretty much any of these in here you can use. However, I typically only use source medium is 95% of the time. There's been cases where I maybe have used like refer or keyword or something, but mostly medium and source are the two things. So in this case, I want to make sure my medium contains paid-social, just to cover myself, paid without a dash, paid social without a dash. You could put in uppercase, uppercase in here too if you're seeing that in your reports to clean that up. But make sure you have or selected, so you can do this or this or this. And that will then, now these are my rules that are set for paid social. So anything where my UTMs are coming in with my mediums of any of these things, or my source medium of this one, it'll jump into paid social. It'll bucket into that. Another one I have here, let's see, I've got one for display. I've added rules, so I'm still using the system defined rule, but I'm actually also saying, okay, if the medium contains display, then also bucket that into display too. And that can help with things when you are running like GDN campaigns or other things. There's some nuance there, but there's other ways to clean that up too if you're having issues with where things are bucketed. So again, you want to start in that channel report first. Go look and see if you have anything coming into other, or in things that you don't want to coming into referral. Start there, get an understanding of what's coming in improperly, and then you come back in here and make adjustments to fix things. So one last thing in here, Google does use, this runs in order. So the first rule that it finds a match, it'll bucket it there. So let's say, that's why I have paid social at the top. If I had paid social below social here, then a lot of my paid social traffic would probably come into social instead of paid social, because it matches to social first. So make sure you just stack these. Usually the user-defined rules I'll put up above the system-defined ones, just to make sure that it's bucketing the way I want it to. So that's how you would adjust them. However, like I said, because there could be issues with how you set these up, and it's once you set them, you got to go. It actually changes the data going forward, so you want to make sure they're clean. So what I usually do is create a copy of my default channel group, and that will then allow me to make any changes I want. So here's my copy, right? And so now I can come in, and these are all my defined ones that I already have set, and I can come in here and make adjustments. So let's say I want to make this a capital P. Okay, so now I can make this a capital P, and then when I save that, my custom rules will work in such a way that it won't affect my default channel groups. I'm not messing with anything there. Then I can come back to my reports and make sure that everything's clean. Make sure that the way I've set it up, is the way I want it to behave, and then I'd come back and then change my default channel group. Now, these custom groups will go back in time. So if you make a change here, it will look back historically, and it doesn't change the data, but it kind of adds a secondary filter on it that allows you to see all the changes you've made in the custom default groupings. It allows you to see those in these channel reports. So let me just jump back into the channel reports here. And this is Google's just test account here. So they do have one set. So they have their default channel groups. They also have this other one. And this is a custom channel grouping. So this is where I would come in, and if I customize this, I come in and just make sure that everything that I think should be set up is set up properly. So I would come in and make sure I still see some stuff in other. I got branded paid search. That kind of makes sense. They've got that broken out. Other paid search, generic paid search. Those can also be a way to break out your paid search more specifically. So in the custom group, Google's basically broken this down this way. This is just in their test environment in Google Analytics that anybody can get access to. So that's how they broke this down. And so once you're clean and feeling good about that, how that breaks down, then you can come back into your channel groups and then or your default channel group and make the same adjustments in here, save that, and then going forward, it should clean up your data. So that's the rundown of channel groups. A lot there, I know. Hit me up with any questions if you have them. But that's the basics of channel groups and how those work. So now we're going to switch gears to attribution and how Google Analytics uses attribution in its reporting. So really, attribution is really just a set of rules for how traffic and revenue are associated to channels that may have contributed to those traffic and revenue. So basically what's getting credit for sales and conversions. So a quick example about how Google by default uses attribution. So in this case, let's say I'm shopping for wool socks. Okay, I go to Google, I type in wool socks, and I click on this first paid ad for Smart Wool. Great. All right, I go to their site, I look around. I'm not ready to buy anything yet, but I leave the site, and then as I'm browsing the web, I get retargeted. I get hit with some ads. Great, I click through, and then I go back to the site. Still don't purchase though. And then I go to Facebook, and I'm scrolling around Facebook, and I see another ad, and I click through. This could be a couple days later. I click through, get to the site, still don't purchase. And then I go back to the site, but I just type in smartwool.com. I don't actually click on an ad. So now I'm back on the site, and I came directly. So I typed in smartwool.com, there I am, and I'm ready to purchase now. I've come to the site 4 times. Now I'm ready to buy. I spend $300. So what do you think? Which channel do you think gets credit for this order? I mean, most people say direct, right? Kind of makes sense. However, the way that Google works, and by default, is that it gives credit to the last non-direct channel. So even though this was the last touch point that someone made to come into the site, Google Analytics would actually give credit to this paid social ad, because that's where the last non-direct traffic came from, and that's what's caused the order to happen. So Google has this timing on it for 6 months. So Google will keep track of where the traffic came from for up to 6 months. It gets reset every time a new source of traffic comes in. So if I came here first on paid search 2 weeks ago, and then a week later I came in on retargeting, my 6 months will start over with retargeting. Then if I come a week later up to paid social, the 6 months starts over, and then it attributed to paid social. So it could be like 4 months later, and I come back direct, paid social is still going to get counted towards that revenue, because it was the last non-direct during that 6 month time frame. So that's by default how Google Analytics tracks their sessions and attributes sessions to different channels. However, there's different ways that you can, different attribution model types, right? So, and you can play with these in different reports. The first one of those is last interaction. So that direct wouldn't make a difference there. Last interaction is, it doesn't matter what the channel is. It could be direct, it could be email, it could be paid search, whatever it is. Whatever the last thing is that the user did to get to the site, they get 100% credit. So that would bump up direct quite a bit. Last non-direct click is what we just talked about. Last Google Ads click, which I don't never use that one. First interaction. This is when somebody comes to the site, the first interaction to the site. So in our case before, that would be paid search. Paid search was what drove someone. It let them know about the brand. Maybe I never heard of Smartwool, so I could get credit. The first interaction would get credit for that if that's my first touch point. Then the linear model is every touch point gets equal credit. Time decay, the channel that's closest to conversion gets the most credit, and the one that's furthest away gets the least credit, so it kind of just decays over time. And then position-based, first and last together get 80% of the credit, and everything else in between gets 20%. So these are just different ways to model things out for attribution. And really, there isn't a right or wrong way. It's just a way to slice up your data in a way to understand how different channels are impacting revenue and traffic that you may not see if you always just use last non-direct click. So there's a few different reports that you can pull from Google Analytics. And the first is the assisted conversion report. And this assisted conversion report is found, let me just show you real quick, and then I'll just jump back here. Under conversions, multi-channel funnels, assisted conversions. Okay, and this is the Google Analytics demo data, so there's not a lot here. So I'm going to jump back over here and show you what this looks like and explain what this looks like. So this is the conversion report, the assisted conversion report. And this shows you how different channels helped push revenue for that time period. So, for instance, let me show one that's has a pretty big gap. So display. Okay, so in this case, if we look at display and we look at our standard reports in Google Analytics, it would show that display has $25,000 of revenue during that time period and 339 conversions. However, display actually helped and assisted with over $61,000 worth of revenue and 790 conversions. So in the standard reporting, display would look like it's doing okay, but not as good as it could be. But if we look at the report based on whether or not it had assisted value, we'll see it actually had quite a bit of push for people, and that kind of makes sense because what happens is with display is somebody may have clicked through on an ad, they may not be ready to buy, right? So they click through the ad. Then they get to the site, they don't purchase, but then they come back to the site through some other channel. They come back through email or through paid search or something. So display doesn't get as much credit for it, but it actually does have more assisted conversion value. So when you're trying to assess how well a marketing channel is working, this can really impact and help you understand how it's doing and what it's doing to overall performance. The last column in this report gives you an indicator of how much assisted value a given channel gave. The closer it is to 1, the more it is like equal. Like it's like it kind of had equal assist versus last click contribution. So for instance, here's direct, 407,000 in assisted and 432. It's pretty even-ish. Paid search 211 versus 208, pretty even, right? It didn't really have a huge impact on assisting. Paid search didn't in this case, and it's at 0.98, so it's really close to that number 1. Whereas things like organic, that's further higher than 1. It actually had a pretty good assisted conversion value, almost $150,000 versus $100,000. So about 13% of total versus about 10% of total. And then even display here, as we talked about before, 2. So this is much further from the number 1, right? So it has a much higher assisted value. So that's a quick way to be able to determine whether or not a channel is doing a good job of assisting or not. Another report is the top conversion path report. Again, I'll jump back to Google Analytics here. That is under conversions, multi-channel funnels, top conversion paths. And this one's pretty fun because, again, this Google data is not great, so I'll jump back here. But this one allows you to see what paths people actually took to get to get to that conversion. So in this case, you can see how many times somebody actually came back to the site before they made a purchase. So in this case, 795 conversions happened with someone coming from paid search 2 times. 465 happened with someone coming from direct 2 times. 383 happened when someone coming from paid search and then direct. And direct, remember, is that someone typically just typing in the address. So someone typing in smartwool.com or whatever it is. Here's another one. Paid search came back 3 times. So they came back from paid search 3 different times, 3 different total sessions coming to the site. So this report's great because you can really see what the conversion path looks like and what channels actually contributed to it and at what levels. And then finally, the attribution model comparison report. Okay, so this one is found under multi-channel funnels, model comparison tool. So this report will show you kind of a side-by-side of those different models. So as we talked about, last non-direct click and first interaction. So you can put any different one of these different models against each other to see how they're actually contributing to things. So for instance, here's my default channel groups. Let me find a good one here. Okay, so affiliate, right? Affiliate tends to be a closing channel. It tends to be a channel that people will go look for a coupon code before they check out. And so they go to Retail Me Not or Ebates or something and they come back to the site. Ebates or that affiliate's going to get credit, even though the user may have come from paid search or someplace else. So affiliate, and this is pretty telling here, in last non-direct click, like the standard model Google Analytics uses, $128,000 would get associated to this. However, the first interaction, like affiliate driving that first interaction, is only $24,000 worth. So there's a huge difference there where affiliate really is helping to close things, but it's not doing anything to, or not as much, to drive awareness and drive new users and everything else. And so you can see there's a huge discrepancy, about an 80% discrepancy between the last non-direct click and the first interaction. And inside the report, I'll jump back here. This is where you'd set this up. So again, I'm under multi-channel funnels, model comparison tool. I can come in here and say I want last non-direct click, which will show kind of how it shows up on all the other reports. And then here's my last interaction. So now I've got a comparison here, and I'm going to come in and select conversions and value. So now I can start to see the breakdown between these. And again, sorry, there's not a great data in this demo account, but you can see the breakdown here, similar to this, where you do have that breakdown. So you can play with any of those different models that you want and compare one to the next to see how your channels are performing when you do different attribution models. So that pretty much wraps it up. There's lots more to Google Analytics, but that's the couple core things there. If you have any questions about attribution or how to use it in reports, definitely reach out to me. You can get me on Twitter at Steve J. Lamar or on LinkedIn at Steve Lamar. Thanks a lot. See ya.